Our next speaker will be Dr. Jim Mensch. Dr. Mensch is an associate professor in the Department of Physical Education and Athletic Training at the University of South Carolina. Since his arrival to USC in 2000, he has served as Program Director for Athletic Training Program. He received his Bachelor of Science degree in Athletic Training from Temple University, his Master of Science degree in Kinesiology from Louisiana State University, and a PhD in Education from the University of Maryland. He has published numerous research articles in sports medicine journals and authored a textbook entitled The Athletic Trainer's Guide to Psychosocial Intervention and Referral. Over the past 10 years, Dr. Mensch has been involved in research grants totaling more than $10 million to examine the impact of athletic trainers in diverse settings, including the military and youth sports population. In 2000, he secured a $1.8 million grant through the Department of Defense to integrate athletic trainers into Fort Jackson military base. Dr. Mensch has been invited to speak on sports medicine issues all over the world, including Shanghai, China, Rome, Italy, and Athens, Greece. He has mentored over 5,000 master's students and 6 doctoral students. In 2009, he received the Alumni Achievement Award from Temple University, and in 2013, he was awarded the College Education's Outstanding Research Award. He currently resides in Ballantyne, South Carolina with his wife, Lorene, son, Jack, and daughter, Anna Grace. Please welcome Dr. Jim Mensch.
Thank you for the opportunity, and especially for the students that have come here on a Sunday to learn more about some of the real life issues going on, not just in South Carolina, but the world. So what I'm going to talk about is examining youth football and a little bit of lacrosse as well, kind of looking at the injuries. We all know that professional sports, they get really good health care. They get really good, they're taken care of by physicians, they're taken care of very well, even in colleges, in high schools. But who takes care of the youth? Who takes care of the millions of kids across this country that are participating in all different types of sports, all different types of activities? When they get hurt, the injuries are the same. They're the same injuries that the high school and the college folks are looking at. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today is some ways to think about what we can do to help make youth sports safer. That's what we're going to look at. 25 to 35 million athletes aged 5 to 15 are going to be participating in sports. That's a big number, and I'm assuming most of you all have participated in some type of youth sport or youth activity as well. 5 million alone playing youth football. There's about 360,000 athletes that are participating in the state of South Carolina as well. Youth lacrosse is a little different. Youth lacrosse has grown in its popularity over the last several years, and some think it has to do something with the dangers of football and parents less likely wanting their child to play football. So we're going to start studying them. In 2014, there was just over 280,000 participating. There seems to be a little difference in the data that we're seeing from playing lacrosse in the north and the south. So those are some of the, whether it's rule changes or whether it's having a history of playing lacrosse in the past. And again, in South Carolina, there just hasn't been a lot of lacrosse leagues until the last 5 or 10 years that have been coming up. Youth football, we have a little bit more data to kind of look at. But my passion is looking at youth football. Specifically, 3.5 million medical visits to the ER annually. So what's happening to a child that's participating in sports at the local youth center when they get hurt? There's no one there that's trained medically to take care of them. They're basically scraped up, put in the car, and taken off to the emergency room, or they're calling the ambulance. So these are problems, these are things that we want to address. Or they're going to look at pediatric visits. They're going to, researchers are going to look and see how many students are going to their physician to see if they've been hurt playing youth sports. One of the things that we're looking to do is increase the standard of coaching, and we're going to look at some of the data that we've been collecting over the years, and I think that's going to be an important point to look at. So, the medical care for youth, these are some things that we kind of want to look at. Who currently takes care of youth sport athletes? Is it the parents, the coaches? So these are variables and things that we kind of want to look at. We want to look at league rules, league policies. Do the coaches even need to be trained, or are these folks that just are showing an interest and their child happens to want to play, that they can all of a sudden become a coach and sure, go ahead, take care of this team? There's a liability standpoint that goes with this. If you're out there in a league that is using folks to, educate and train your son or daughter, there's a liability issue that some of these leagues are facing from a legal standpoint. And we certainly want to be able to make parents have informed decisions. Is lacrosse safer than football? Is football dangerous at all? Do we really have any numbers to kind of say that? Or are you more likely to get hurt just playing in the backyard as you would on the football field? Those are decisions and things that I would want you all to think about. And it was nice to hear you all will be the leaders in the near future. So these are kind of issues that you certainly want to understand. And obviously there's a need for research. We don't know what we don't know. So I want to be able to try to shed some light through some of the research that I'm doing to help answer some of these questions. There's no bigger topic in sports these days than concussions. There really isn't. Players are linked now to CTE and some more injuries and suicides. And when should you allow a player to go back in a game? Who's dictating that rule? You can look. South Carolina has been on the forefront of some of this, passing a law to protect student athletes, a concussion law that your athletes here at Hammond are bound to. We're also looking, these are some comments that some of the NFL players have made recently with, I'm not sure I'd let my son play football. The NFL can't be trusted to take care of these brain injuries that we're talking about. So this is a cutting-edge, hot topic that's being addressed, not just from a youth standpoint, but all the way up through the NFL. And like I said, we don't know what we don't know, so it's important for us to try to study these opportunities. So, if I was to ask you, what are we going to look at from a variable standpoint? Okay, we understand that youth football and injuries and youth lacrosse and injuries is important, so what do we want to study? What do we want to look at? I put up some variables that I'm looking at. I've teamed up with the Lattimore Foundation, and we're working to address these problems, not just in South Carolina, but all over the country. The first one is injuries. What does that tell us? We want to be able to know who's getting hurt. What kinds of injuries are they? What's the rate, the frequency? Are they severe injuries, or are they just bumps and bruises? How long are the students out? Are they back in right away? So we don't have that data. We have that data in the NFL. We have that data in college. We have that data pretty much in high schools now. We don't have that data in youth. We just don't know. Some of the other things that we look at are the types of leagues. Whether it's a weight-restricted league or an age-restricted league, we want to look at, are there differences? Is one safer versus the other? We also want to look at things related to the coaches and the rules. Some of the leagues require coaching certification and require coaches to be able to have some type of background knowledge in some medical way. We also want to look at related to head impacts. Head impacts is something that, with concussions, we put these accelerometers on their, behind their ear or even on their helmet, and we're looking to see what's the G-force that these helmets and these kids are hitting. So we kind of want to measure that. And then one of the things that I've just started to look at is maturity. Is it really necessary to have an age league or a weight league, or should it be based more upon maturity level? Where you have a 12-year-old that is unbelievably mature versus a 12-year-old that really hasn't even hit puberty yet, and they're going up against each other. So those are some of the variables that we want to look at to try to study and see what's going on. So what I'm going to kind of go over briefly with you is a 2 to 3 year project in various forms with the Daedalus Center. The Daedalus Center is it's an injury research center in Indianapolis that collects all the NCAA data. And through a grant with them, we're starting to look more at the youth football level. Okay? We partnered up with them here at the University of South Carolina. So the size and scope related to this is a multi-state area. So we're looking at not just South Carolina, but all over the country to try to look at some of this. We have lots of communities. We're basically looking at the age range somewhere between 5 to 14 years old. So these are the studies that we're doing across the country. The player demographics, just some of the things that are interesting of note to try to look at. I look at the weight. We had a maximum kid that weighed 311 pounds playing in the same league as someone that was weighing 36 pounds. Now, is that an age-restricted league or a weight-restricted league? That's an age-restricted league. So I can have a 13-year-old that weighs 311 pounds, and I can have a 13-year-old that's weighing 36 pounds, and they're playing against each other. So again, some of the variables that we want to look at, and age only, age weight, so you can kind of look at some of the numbers. But again, they're all playing together. As I kind of go over some of the data here, I kind of have a take-home point or an opportunity to reduce injuries. I'm going to put a little POW there so you can kind of see it. So the results. So when we look at kind of the global scale of things, what are some of the things we find? So age-only league versus weight league. We didn't find any differences related to the injuries that were there. We controlled for all the variables. There was no real differences in any of the variables that we looked at related to safety. Now, one of the reasons we speculate this to be true is that some of the age-restricted leagues had limits on the ball carrier. You couldn't carry the ball if you weighed X amount. You had to play on the line. So leagues have done some, modifications to make them potentially safer when you have those kind of restrictions on who can carry the ball. Would it really be fair to have a 200-pound kid carrying the ball against a 36-pound kid? It just really wouldn't. So again, that was one of the findings we looked at there. So some of the injury data. It's nice to know. I mean, only 90% of the injuries, were severe. So we're really looking at 90% of the injuries were minor, and they returned in less than 7 days. So they were really bumps and bruises and things like that across the 3-year study to look at. We're really only dealing with 10% that were severe. Risk of injury by severity. So when we look at this, we have non-time loss and time loss. So that's 24 hours or more. And then we certainly look at concussions, which is going to be one of the key factors that we want to look at. The injury type, is the concussions a problem at the youth level? Well, 4.3% is kind of what we're looking at, and that's going to be right around what you'll see at the NCAA and the high school level. But nice to know, 95.7, almost 96% of the athletes who played 2 seasons will not have a concussion. So that's good news. Overall incident by event, so games and practice. You're much more likely to get hurt in the game than you are at practice, even though we're going to have more injuries at practice. Now, you got to kind of wrap your head around that. You're more likely to get hurt in a game, but really only 12 people or 11 people are playing in the game. But in practices, there's going to be more people participating at the time. So the rate of injury is more likely to occur at the game. But in practice, you're more likely to get injured. Okay? One of the things that I want to do is compare levels. I've already talked about the differences between youth sports, high school, and college. So that's important to look at when we want to make those comparisons. Now, one of the things that you need to keep in mind as we go over these numbers is how often do the youth leagues practice? Maybe Tuesday night and Thursday night with a game on Saturday. High schools are practicing every day. Colleges are practicing every day. They don't really take any time off. So when we look at some of these, the number of injury or the rate of injury, we have to keep in mind that how much they're practicing. Not to mention the coaching level. College coaches, high school coaches are trained. They know what they're doing. We just really don't know who's coaching in the youth population. It could be anybody. Just a parent off the street that kind of wants to come in, and they played sports when they were kids, so the next thing you know, they're coaching. So injury rate by all injuries, we look at NCAA, we look at high school, and we can break it down by games and practice. So as I said, you're getting hurt in the game more. And the 14 and 13-year-olds are kind of together here. But when you add all of these numbers up, you're going to see youth sports, the kids are getting hurt at equal numbers to those in high schools and colleges. So why don't we care for them the same way that we care for our high schools and colleges? That's a question that you want to ask yourself. Concussion risk. Again, one of the hot topics that we're looking at related to concussions. Youth, 4.3%. I showed you that number a little bit earlier. So 4% of the injuries are concussions, whereas in the NCAA, 8 in high schools. But youth football is only practicing 1 to 2 times a week. Can you imagine if they were practicing more? If they were practicing 5, 6 times? So to me, these numbers are across the board. I don't see any differences between the risk of injury in high schools to colleges to youth. So these are some things that we want to be able to address in the future. Does that make sense? That's important to understand. It was also nice to see that the 5-year-olds and the 7-year-olds weren't having concussions. That was nice to see where it's really a lot of the older kids. Which gets me to the research project that I'm currently starting on now, related to maturity. I think it's related to maturity. One of the things when I look at, and I see a 12-year-old out there with a beard playing against a 12-year-old, it just doesn't even look like they're close to going through puberty, and they're both 12. And they're lined up right against each other. So I want to study the onset or the injury related to maturity level. So some more numbers just about how many concussions we had in the 2-year aggregate. But as far as incidence by age level, our 14-year-olds are having more concussions than what we see in the normal high school and colleges. So, and then again, these comparable numbers across the board with high schools there as well. Games and practices looking into. So this tells me that we need to make a more serious effort to address the health care at the youth level in all the recreation leagues that you see. Whether it's youth soccer, youth football, youth lacrosse, these are pretending. The kids are playing the same. I mean, the injuries are happening at the same kind of rate. Okay, one of the other things that we wanted to look at was related to coaching. I told you coaching standards. So we looked at what we call heads-up football. USA Football has together a program related to heads-up training where the coaches have to get trained. So we looked at different youth football leagues that trained their coaches and other ones that just kind of did whatever it is that they do. So we call the heads-up football training versus the non-HUF. So USA Football heads-up program, and we're comparing within. Same number of folks, 71 teams, and then we also wore those accelerometers on there. So, look at the numbers, and I don't want to overwhelm you with statistics. I'm going to point out 2 of them here. Look at all injuries. The heads-up football training league, we're averaging about 1.7, the non-HUF, 7.3. We're looking at heads-up football trained in games, 8 versus 13. Unbelievably significant related to who's getting hurt in which leagues. Okay? So I threw up some numbers there related to athlete exposure. And exposure is one athlete participating in a practice or a game. That's an exposure. Okay? So these are injuries per 1,000 exposures. Okay? Now, what that tells me is, compared to the non-heads-up football league, there's a 76% reduction in injuries based upon whether the coaches are having specific training or not. Players in heads-up leagues were 57% less likely to sustain a time loss injury. And then heads-up football leagues had a 34% reduction in concussions. So overall, it's fascinating to look at when you have coaches that are trained versus coaches that are not trained. The other neat thing that we were doing is putting the accelerometers, those little X patches behind their ears, and you can kind of see, we can look at the force, whether it's direct, whether it's linear, whether it's rotational on each athlete, each hit. Percent of total impacts, I mean, the older kids were getting hit more. They were having more head impacts. That to me means they were putting their head in there more and they were doing more things. So that's not surprising to me. We could look at rotation, we could look at direct, we could look at linear. The older kids were having more of those linear and rotational impacts. To me, part of that is attributed to the kids that are younger avoiding the hits. They just don't put their head in there like the older kids will. You can kind of see that on the data. But again, we look at the HUF versus the non-HUF league. So, heads-up training, okay, non-HUF versus HUF in a game are kind of equal. But when we look at overall, and this is number of head impacts, so imagine how many head impacts you have over the course of 2 seasons. I mean, it's a lot. So these numbers might not look all that different, but they are significantly different at a huge level. When we look at overall non-huff versus huff, so our non-heads-up training leagues getting about 11 hits versus 9.8 overall per kid. So what that tells me is the leagues that don't have similar levels of training, they're hitting more. And I saw this firsthand. I saw a league out there where the coach had two kids line up against each other and put cones there and basically said, run at each other. Like you see rams at the top of the hill where they boom, they run into each other. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to look out for as far as the training our coaches to be dealing with these kids. So should we use these accelerometers? You know, it's big. We put some on our athletes at USC. We're trying to look and measure this stuff, but one of the things that the data is suggesting is the 80G magic number. All these companies are coming up with these accelerometers to try to sell them to make sure that we're keeping concussions at a minimum, but I'm not sure 80G is the number. You know, sometimes the lights will start flashing when these kids take a hit at that level, but this is some of the debate that we want to have. We want to know, can you absorb an 80G hit and not have a concussion, and then have a 10G hit and have a concussion? So, again. We don't have a lot of stuff on youth lacrosse. I know Hammond was part of it last year. It was really a pilot study, so we were looking at about 550 youth athletes across with athletic trainers assigned to the league. One of the things that we noticed, the kids just weren't getting hurt that much. They just weren't getting hurt that much. You know, we can look at the 9-year-olds with about 3,100 exposures, and there were really only 3 injuries that lost any time at all, and those were 3 concussions. So there weren't really any significant things to look at related to injuries in youth lacrosse. No differences between any of the leagues and any of the divisions. So, my last slide. Final thoughts. Injuries are going to occur. There's nothing we're going to be able to do to prevent that. So we're going to have to deal with it. And appropriate care for injuries is going to be important. 2 things. 1, let's get an athletic trainer or a certified professional out there dealing with high school, not just the high school and the colleges, but dealing with the youth level. And then let's educate the coaches. Okay? Getting athletic trainers, important. Getting educated coaches, super important. Be an advocate for better policies for implementing these procedures out at the place where they're out on the football field and out on the lacrosse field. And then more research. Think about ways that you can help reduce these injuries. Okay? We need to have good research. We need to be studying this from a longitudinal perspective. We can't just go and say we see one athlete have an injury in football and say, that's it, my kid's never going to play football again. We have to have the data to be able to tell us what's seriously going on. Okay? So, questions? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mensch. I feel like that's a very applicable speech for us because so many of us play more than one sport and we play it at such a high intensity level.